Good afternoon, everyone. Andy Jacob here with the DotCom Magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series. We have a fantastic show today. You know, when my team brought this company to my desk, I was very interested in it. And when I found out that Rudy Moy would agree to appear on the show, I was very, very excited and very interested. This is a fascinating business model they've been able to put together. The name of the company is Apartment Data, and we've been able to book Rudy Moy on the show today. We're so excited to have him on the Entrepreneur Spotlight Series. We're going to get into it. Rudy, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Andy, thanks so much for inviting us today.
Rudy, this is really interesting what you've been able to do. When I saw what you were doing, it made all the sense in the world. You're in the apartment data business. And for those people watching, the apartment industry, the apartment space is a multi-billion-dollar space. Rudy is one of the leaders in data for apartment buildings, apartment owners. It's very fascinating. When you think about it, people that own apartment buildings, they need data, and they go to Rudy for all that data. So Rudy, let's pull the lens back to 30,000 feet and let's get into it. Tell us about Apartment Data.
So Apartment Data collects information on 17,000 apartments across 6 states, 12 major metros. We started in Houston, Texas in 1986. Basically, 17,000 apartments represents about 4.5 million units, and we covered the southern United States.
This is amazing. So when we were talking last week, because we always talk before the interviews, it came to mind that people that own apartment buildings, they need data, because not only do they need data about what's going on in their immediate area, but they need data about all the apartments in the surrounding area. So let's talk about that, and let's talk about why apartment building owners or big corporations that own apartment buildings need this type of data.
Well, one thing is that data is like milk in your refrigerator. It sort of ages over time. And so you always have to get fresh data. And the thing that we pride ourselves on is we collect information from the property level up. So we have a lot of granular data that many of the national firms don't have. And so one of the things that apartment owners need to have is to be able to compete with neighboring apartments on a floor plan level basis. And we have that information. In addition, for investors and brokers, they need the ability to, if they're going to do a renovation, if they're going to decide to buy a piece of property, they need to know what the surrounding amenities are at competitive apartments that they want to compete with, just so that they can get a good view of, you know, what the rent rolls are, what the revenue they might be able to generate, and then they can work out their ROI. So we actually tie the ecosystem together, because the data we have as an independent third party is invaluable.
It's amazing. And your platform provides continuously updated property information. Very interesting for the apartment complexes and apartment owners to understand the competition and really to properly position themselves in the community that they serve. So let's talk about that. Let's say I'm an apartment building owner, Rudy. I reach out to you at Apartment Data. I'm in one of your sweet spots or one of the areas that you serve. How does that conversation go? What do you tell them that you can give them that will help them increase their rent rolls, increase the number of people that are renting from them, decrease their vacancy rates, and increase their ROI?
Yeah, so one of the big things that we have is we have the ability for an apartment owner, usually they only think about their comps, which is the set of apartments that they compete with. But actually our intelligence is much broader than that, because we have big data algorithms that look not only at their comps, but also based on their comps, drive a set of potential comps, which could number in the hundreds of other apartments that maybe they don't drive by, and so consequently they don't think are competitors of theirs. And so what we do is we then take a look at this combined set of comps, potential comps, and then we look at it on a floor plan level basis. Because if you have an efficiency and the apartment that you think you're competing with across the street doesn't have an efficiency, you're actually not competitors. And so what we do is on the floor plan level, and most apartment complexes have maybe a dozen different floor plans. For each floor plan, we help them identify who their competitors are among that population. And many of them get very surprised because they may think they're only competing against 8 other properties, but they may be competing against, 24 properties on that floor plan and maybe hundreds of units. And so it really opens their eyes in terms of the information that we can provide them.
Rudy, this is a great business model that is based on data. You've done such a remarkable job. The people that work with you their retention rate is amazing. They stay with you for a very long time because of this incredible data that you offer. I would imagine in the apartment space that things are very fluid, because what might be an apartment complex that has a 30% vacancy rate one week, maybe a month later, they might have a 10% vacancy rate. And that would be very important for their competition to know.
Well, yes, typically, yeah. And so one of the big features we offer is a product called the Competition Radar. And what the Competition Radar does is it actually does the job for them. It searches the surrounding areas of these comps, potential comps. It identifies, availability, changes in management companies, which basically dictates a change in strategy. It looks at, if they've got a new policy for what they're paying locators, pricing changes. So we look at these on a 30-day basis. And if a manager just looks at our platform, let's say once a week, they'd get a very clear idea of what their competitors are doing.
It's really amazing. So to simplify this for me, I sort of think about it. I own an apartment complex. And let's say I have a 3-bedroom apartment, and let's say my price is X, and I use apartment data. I find out that really there aren't any other 3-bedroom apartments in my area that really are competing against me. There's really no competition against my 3-bedroom apartment. So based on that supply and demand curve in my mind, as I pretend to go through this as an apartment owner, I'm thinking to myself, well, there's no 3-bedroom apartments out there. Maybe I could raise my price a little bit because the demand outweighs the supply. Is that sort of the thinking? And if it is, how does all that work?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is we help you validate if that's the correct decision or not, because we can look at, what the rate that you're charging for your 3-bedroom apartment. We can decide what the size of that floor plan is, and then we just compare it with other properties of the same size or the same makeup, and we can validate that. Now, one of the things that we do in comparison to other systems is that we work in a cooperative manner with the apartment complex. So what we do is we provide the data, you provide the local knowledge. So for example, if there's construction in front of your 3-bedroom apartment and you get no traffic coming to your apartment to see, or it's just a major inconvenience, then the reality is that you may want to raise your price, but you can't. And that local condition is something that you would know about. But we could maybe do the analysis and tell you, well, if you didn't have that road construction, you probably could raise your price.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Everything is driven by data, including, people that own apartment buildings. It's very fascinating. You're one of the leaders in the field. You've been able to build an on-site dashboard to make it really simple and easy for these apartment complex owners to understand what's going on by going into the dashboard. Maybe you could explain a little bit about the evolution of your dashboard and how easy it has made it for your clients to be able to figure out what's going on with the apartment complexes in their surrounding area.
So one of the things about the business having been the company being in business for 35 years, and the founder is actually still with us as our chief technical officer, is that we've gone through the evolution from binders all the way through first generation internet, second generation internet, the cloud, and now we're really a fully internet based service. And so through that evolution, we've actually developed techniques that are applicable through all that transition through generations. So just the fact that you have better technology doesn't mean that you have a better mousetrap. You have to also include the methodologies and the processes that have been refined over 35 years to then couple that with the new technology to present something that's highly usable to customers.
Rudy, that's very fascinating. 35 years in business. The founder is still with you as the chief technical officer. You started with binders 35 years ago, and you've moved all the way to an incredible, easy to use technological platform that's really incredible. And congratulations on what the entire team has done at Apartment Data. Rudy, when I think about the system and I think about the platform, for me, everything has become very visual. So maybe you could explain what happens on the platform. Do I get to see what's going on? Are there little red dots that show me what's happening around, my apartment, so I can see exactly what's happening and have a quick understanding by viewing, if you will, what's happening on your platform?
Yeah, absolutely. We view that information is not useful unless it's easily digested and easily actionable. So we integrate, Google Maps, so you can look very quickly and see, where your apartment is and where the competitive apartments are, where the competitive floor plans are. If we go on a floor plan pricing basis, when we recommend prices or changes, we have up arrows and down arrows, and people are very familiar with, red lights, meaning, wow, that's something I pay attention to. Yellow lights, meaning caution. I should pay attention to it if I have time. Green lights mean, well, only if you have a lot of time should you pay attention to that, because everything is working fairly well. And even so we try to provide decision tools that basically are consistent with how people, have been educated and learn just through your daily life.
That is fascinating. What a very interesting industry and vertical specific business that you've been able to develop. On the show, we always talk that specialists win and generalists lose. In this particular case, Rudy, as the CEO, you've continued to grab the baton and provide Apartment Data an incredible opportunity to continue to grow. And this is very, very fascinating using data. Let's talk about COVID just for a minute, because many companies are working on the margins. In other words, margins have decreased dramatically across the board for many different industries. And I would imagine that in the apartment industry or the apartment vertical, every additional point of increased ROI and increased margin really makes a big difference for these apartment complexes. So could you address that a little bit, and how your Apartment Data offering can help apartment complexes earn more money or increase their ROI?
Yeah, so one of the two big challenges for apartments really is, the rental moratorium as one. And so there may be renters who are not paying rent that they cannot evict. And so consequently, they're holding a spot that, maybe a paying renter won't come into. Secondly, because everyone's working at home, a lot of the most expensive apartments, which tend to be in the downtown areas, with all the restaurants and bars closed, no one wants to stay there. And so many of those affluent renters then move out to the suburbs and buy homes. And that may have accelerated that process by a couple of years for them. So it's become a challenging environment for what we call the A-class apartments. And many of the other apartments are actually doing better, But there's a lot of dynamism in the apartment industry. There's a lot of optimism that probably before the end of the year, things will start righting itself again. And we've been very fortunate in that because of the intelligence that we provide, we actually give them that extra edge in being able to understand what the trends are. And, we've been, as a company, publishing COVID reports since I think as early as maybe April last year. and providing those general reports free to actually anybody that asks about the industry. A lot of the press has been covering us on the COVID reports. And the bright side is that, if we compare what rental rates are starting in December, everything's been moving forward and moving up. So, the industry should look at the fact that probably the worst is over and things are looking up going forward.
I love to hear that. I love to hear that. And as you mentioned, so many people are working out of their home now. I would imagine that apartment complexes, they really need to think about, whether they're going to provide high-speed internet and whether they're going to bring, special lines into the complexes, or whether they're going to let the renters sort of, bring their own lines in through the local provider. How does all that work? Are apartment complexes offering high-speed internet as an amenity, or is that not really happening as of yet?
I think that many of the new ones actually, contract with AT&T or Verizon or one of the major carriers and bring fiber into the building already. Usually that is up to the tenant to subscribe to, because people have different needs. The business centers obviously will have that capability. However, I would think that many of the business centers are also closed or limited access just to keep the number of people down. But I think that the more important thing about our platform in particular is that most of the time, as you mentioned earlier, people think about competing on a one bedroom basis, or 2-bedroom basis, or 3-bedroom basis, but that's actually not true. So for example, if the renter has $1,000 and they're working at home, they may be in a 1-bedroom apartment, but when they look at the broader universe of other things that are available, they may discover that a 2-bedroom half a mile down the road costs also $1,000. And so one of the things that we bring to the attention of the apartments is the fact that we allow them to look at the world the way a renter would. So if the renter has $1,000, these are all the things that they could buy in comparison to the $1,000 1-bedroom, let's say, that you're renting. And so that really opens their eyes, because, they think they're only competing against 1-bedrooms, but there's a lot of 2-bedrooms that are on the market.
I love it. That makes all the sense in the world. That's fascinating. That really is interesting that you are able to offer to the apartment owners the viewpoint of the renter, the person that has $1,000 or $800 or $1,500 or $2,500 in his or her pocket to spend on a monthly basis, and allows them to view it through the renter's peer view, which is very, very interesting. If I own an apartment complex, Rudy, and I have my advertising out for my offering for, let's just use our 3-bedroom apartment, mm-hmm. and let's say I have it rented or have it up for rent, a possibility for rent of $2,500. Let's just use that as an example, because we're trying to understand a little bit more how this works. So I go on to the system and I see that maybe it would behoove me to raise my rent or lower my rent. But in this particular case, let's say it behooves me to lower my rent to $2,200, because I feel by using your system, I'll get it leased up very, very quickly. But I have it out into the internet universe at $2,500. So do I have to go back in and change all my listings down to $2,200 now that I've seen that I need to rent it at $2,200 versus the existing $2,500?
Well, so many apartments like to keep their market price, let's say, at $2,500. But what they do is they would offer a concession. So what that would be, 1 month free is equivalent to about 8% off in rent. 2 months free, about 16%. And so that's how they tend to get people in-house. Because if you've got a vacant apartment, it doesn't matter if it's vacant for an extra month, or if you gave that month away to somebody else that would sign a 12-month contract. And so that's one of the techniques that they use to adjust price without adjusting price. And at the same time, they can go back to their owners and say, we're still renting this at $2,500, even if, it worked out to be a little bit less.
I love it. Well, we're getting a little inside scoop from the master, Mr. Rudy Moy. This is very interesting. And it's fascinating because we speak to so many entrepreneurs, Rudy, and many entrepreneurs watch the show. And the reason why we bring someone like you on is because obviously it's fascinating. It's very interesting. And also, entrepreneurs in other spaces are going to be listening to you and listening to what you're doing at Apartment Data. And they're going to be saying to themselves, wow, maybe I can take some of those components of what Apartment Data is doing and think about my company or my technology and my platform a little bit differently. Let's talk a little bit about the Apartment Data onboarding process. When somebody calls you or your team, what's the onboarding? Do they get a customer service expert that helps them onboard? Do they get put into the dashboard immediately? Do you have a conversation with them? What does that look like?
Yeah, so it depends on the type of customer and the level of service that they purchase. The most basic level of service, we probably already have them in our database. And so that would be simply someone giving them, their login access, their username and password. They can get on. They could then, and the most basic level, they probably already can play around and figure it out. But usually we have a customer service, a rep that handholds them, walks them through, helps them do some preliminary market surveys, some market understanding, teaches them about the platform, follows up with them, in a couple of weeks or a month to see how they're getting on with the system. On a more extensive user, let's say somebody who's using, the highest level of our service where we actually are suggesting prices to their platform, we have to go through an auditing process, which then we validate the history of their pricing, the unit mixes, the types of properties they have, types of floor plans, and the numbers. And we just go through that process. Depending upon how long they've been in our database, it could be, let's say, a 1-week process, or it could be a 1-month process, depending on how extensive that is. For customers that are very, at our highest level of service, we end up establishing some sort of a data feed with them where they basically provide us on a very regular basis changes in price, maybe changes in names of their properties. Many of them also renovate some of their properties. And so, we have to manage the mix of renovated versus what they call conventional units. And so
very interesting.
It's a very ongoing dialogue, but those are our closest customers.
Rudy, that's incredible. That's amazing. At DotCom Magazine, we love data. We love talking about it. We love learning about it. When we think about an apartment complex, we think about the fact that we wonder where it's located. We always think about real estate as location. Right. Is it near a mall? Can you walk to a convenience store? Is it near restaurants and things like that? So in your system, do you get fed information from other data aggregators so that it makes your system more comprehensive for your customers? How does all that work?
Well, so one of the things that we do is each of the apartment properties are gathered into what we call submarkets. And so when we establish a submarket, so I think in Houston we have 42 submarkets as an example. There's a certain personality for each of the submarkets. We typically interview and we study each of the markets that we're in to such an extent that we can almost walk, the people that do it for us can almost walk the streets, because we pick up the nomenclature, we pick up what the locals call that particular area. We work with people on the ground to figure out, what are the boundaries of that submarket? And then we put each of the properties in the submarket and we create submarket reports. So they can analyze their property relative to the home metro, that particular submarket, or if let's say they're on the border of a submarket, they could look at, combine those adjacent submarkets into kind of like a super submarket and then do an analysis that way. So one of the things that our system does is we really, I guess maybe we're the Burger King of data. We give it to them their way, and we make it very easy for them to mix and match and combine the information that makes it useful for them to make a decision, because there's no point in having data if data doesn't help drive a decision or drive some action.
I love it. And of course, your dashboard makes it fast, simple, and easy for the people that need this data to be able to help them make decisions, which is really amazing. In your dashboard, I believe you also have e-brochure templates and things like that that
yes.
your customers can use. Let's talk about that a little bit. That's
right. So one of the big things that we also enable is we enable our property members to be able to communicate directly with their retail customers. So, for example, if somebody comes into their office, they can use our platform to actually email an electronic brochure to them. We could also help them aggregate who sister properties are. So a sister property is a property that's managed by the same management company. So let's say a prospective renter comes into your property and you just don't have a 2-bedroom, 2-bath that's facing the pool, but you think your neighbor, your sister property, half mile down the road has that property. You could actually then go through the list, identify those sister properties that have that capability, that feature, and then recommend those also to the prospect. So what that does is management companies want to incentivize their properties to, if they can't rent to a renter, to incentivize them to recommend sister properties. And so there's a lot of features we have in the platform. We allow you to post down to Facebook, post to Craigslist, because that's a very common way in which people get properties. We can allow you to post to Twitter. You just need to log into your account on our, through our platform, and then you can access all those social media programs as well.
That is really, really awesome. You have thought of it all for the apartment complexes. It seems to me like it's a single point of running an apartment complex business. It's very, very fascinating and very interesting what you've been able to do over 35 years by starting with binders the old-fashioned way and now being at the cutting edge of having a technological platform for your customers. Really, really fascinating, really interesting. Your platform continuously updates property information, and it's really important for these apartment owners really to understand the competitive landscape of what they're looking at on a daily or weekly basis. It's very important, and you provide that to them. Rudy, as you know, at the end of the show, we like to talk about entrepreneurship. I think we've covered a lot with what you're doing with apartment data, and it's very, very interesting, even more fascinating than I thought it was when we originally spoke. Really great. So we have some younger entrepreneurs that watch the show, Rudy, and we always like to allow our successful entrepreneurs to sort of look into the camera and give some motivational information to those younger entrepreneurs, or maybe tell them about what it takes to be a great entrepreneur, or maybe, give them some words of wisdom if you can. And we'd like to open that up to you, Rudy, because what you've been able to do at Apartment Data is really, really compelling.
Well, great. Well, thank you. I think everyone talks about passion, right? But I think passion is only part of the formula. The other piece of it is you got to listen to your customer, because your customer is your source of, paying your bills. And then you got to also have a lot of grit. You got to have the ability to persevere when other people say that, well, this isn't going to work. Or other people will say, well, this is too hard. And unless you have grit and can develop a vision that you can get other people to follow and help you in realizing that dream, you can't do it. You can't do it alone, and you can't do it by browbeating everyone. You've got to be persuasive enough, understand your customers, and convince the whole ecosystem that you're onto something, and everybody will work to help you make it true.
That's great advice, to surround yourself with talented people, empower them, be the type of leader that makes sense, be the type of leader that has some compassion and has some kindness about them and has some humbleness about them. And when you surround yourself with talented people and they feel that compassion from you, they're most apt to work even harder and smarter and longer and stronger for you. And that makes all the sense in the world, Rudy. Listen, this has been a great interview. I'm so fascinated about this entire space with what you're doing. It's really remarkable, data-driven, 35-year-old company that is really just providing a superior service to their customers. Really interesting, Rudy. I'm so happy that you could come on the show today. Thank you so much for joining the Entrepreneur Spotlight series. Super interesting.
And thank you very much. I would like to say we're a 35-year-old startup and still going. So thank you very much for your time today.